Hey, everybody. My name is Kevin Henry, editor in chief for drbicuspid.com. Thank you so much for joining us for what I know is going to be a fascinating podcast today. Have some leaders in our dental industry to talk about tariffs, their impact, and what dental practices and dental industry should expect moving forward. And I want each of these gentlemen to introduce themselves and let you know a little bit about their background before we dive in. And I'm going to start, Dave Steck. I'm going to start with you. It's good to see you, my friend, and I'd love for audience just a little bit more about you.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate the opportunity to be on today. My name's Dave Steck, and I spent 45 years in the dental distribution business. Started as a small independent that was sold to a company called Sullivan Dental. That was sold again to Henry Schein. Spent the last 27 years with Henry Schein. Retired as president of Henry Schein last March, and am now a consultant.
Well, thanks for being on today. I really do appreciate it. And Joe Talangis, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Hey, doing well, Kevin. Thank you. It's great to see that Bears mug come up every once in a while.
Every once in a while, right? There you go.
I'm Joe Talangis. I'm the president and chief operating officer for the GC America companies. We have our home office just outside of Chicago, where we manufacture, develop products, sell. We also are based out of Switzerland. We have been for the past 13 years globally. We have a Japanese heritage that goes back almost 105 years. My background is primarily life sciences. A lot of my formative years were with Abbott Laboratories in their hospital business. Number of different responsibilities, a spinoff of that company that Pfizer acquired. And then I pivoted into some other things in private equity and wound care. And I was very happy when a recruiter called me about GC. I didn't know who GC was, to be quite frank, so I called my dentist. And he gave me rave reviews on the company. And the more I learned about this family business and how potentially I could help this company to become what we envision, it got me very excited. So I love the dental industry, and I'm learning tons every day.
Well, glad to have you on. And also want to introduce Dr. Barrett Straub. Dr. Straub, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. A quick introduction. I owned my own private solo practice for nearly 20 years in Port Washington, Wisconsin. And a few years back, had a really cool opportunity to become CEO of a company called Act Dental coaching. And we coach private practice on the business aspects of running a practice. And then recently, Act Dental and a company called Smile Source merged, and now I have the privilege of being CEO of Smile Source. And for those that haven't heard of Smile Source, we are a community dedicated to elevating and helping private independent practitioners. So in our organization, I represent thousands of private practitioners out there. So tariffs and this topic is an appropriate one for all of dentistry and specifically private practice. So thanks for having me, Kevin. Really appreciate it.
Glad to have you on. I'm glad that we have three completely different perspectives here. So, Dr. Straub, since I just asked you a question, I'm going to keep going with you. If you're the spotlight, that's all right. What are you hearing from your clients about tariffs, and is this a concerning issue for them?
I think anything that potentially squeezes the profit margin of private practitioners, which is already squeezed, it's a concern. I think there's uncertainty, right? It's hard to watch enough news to know what, you hear a lot of the sound bites and read the headlines on tariffs. So there's definitely some uncertainty about what is actually happening and then what is the outcome of it. However, I think everyone's smart enough to know when you hear tariff, you think rising costs, which affects every business owner. And not inclusive of dentists.
And Joe, you mentioned obviously GC's ties with international. How is your company navigating the world of tariffs, and what are you hearing from your customers about it as well?
So there's two things. I would argue that almost every business you have, we're a manufacturing business, so we do a lot of research and development, a lot of manufacturing. You're heavily sourcing from around the globe, and most businesses are like that. Most businesses have a global supply chain. It could be materials. It could be components. In our case, we have like our MI paste tubes coming from Canada as an example, right? We have raw ingredients on certain materials coming from Australia, Japan. So it's very similar when you speak to a lot of manufacturers, whether it's consumables or it's equipment. All of us rely on a global supply chain, which once you implement any form of change, like a tariff or a tax, you start to see a lot of, and Dr. Straub used it, uncertainty about planning, costing, et cetera, and then trying to determine, as a business, you have to make a profit. How do you make a profit? But also, how do you take care of the customers that you feel terrible, to be quite frank, having to take a price up? How do you minimize that impact to our customers? And I've talked to hundreds of customers as we've been learning more, and all of us have been learning around the clock, since this started. I called again the same thing I called my own dentist, and I said, Scott, how's this going to affect your business? And he's got a great business, high quality. He said, you know what? We're just going to have to manage. He said, we've had a lot of challenges relative to labor with dental hygienists and other over the past few years. He goes, I'll have to figure out, how we can move costs around. So he started kind of walking through his book of business on consumables, capital, other capital investments he wants to make. And he's a solo practitioner with a very healthy practice. But for him, it had some concern. He said the main thing, though, he said to me, the main thing, Joe, you need to continue focus on is quality. What you can't allow happen is, and it could very well happen, is that manufacturers start to cut quality, which we cannot do that because every patient that we're serving through a dental office for years is counting on a manufacturer to make sure we've got the highest quality to help that dentist and to help those patients and those families be healthy.
It's a great point about quality. And Dave, let me ask you from a distribution standpoint or from a 30,000 foot view, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges right now navigating that, what goes on between the dentists and what goes on between the corporations that are out there as well whenever it comes to these tariffs?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, of course, is pricing instability. I mean, it's been touched on a little bit already, and that obviously, during COVID, Kevin, as you remember, and I'm sure all the listeners remember, we had a lot of pricing instability and some incredible swings in pricing. That kind of settled down. Obviously, we've now reopened the Pandora's box a bit. And as a distributor, that caused a couple of different issues. One is just an integrity issue with the customer, and that you quote a price, and then the price changes, and then you blame tariffs, but I don't know that it gets to be a difficult conversation with customers. And also, we have a lot of agreements out there, contractual pricing, to sell products for X for Y period of time, and that causes you have to go back and renegotiate those, and some of those don't go as well as you'd like. So that would be the biggest single thing. But a couple other points I just wanted to make. One is that there are certain products that just do not make any sense to manufacture in the United States that dentists use. I mean, gloves are one. A lot of masks, I think 90+% of that comes from out of the country. That's not going to change with a tariff. It just makes it more expensive for everyone. Also, some technologies which were developed outside the United States. X-rays. Most of the X-rays that are used today are almost all made outside the United States, with just a few exceptions. Glass ionomers, what Joe sells, those technology was developed outside the United States. CAD/CAM technology developed outside the United States. So it just makes it more expensive to bring it into the country, and for a dentist to stay up and keep their practice up to date with the latest things that are in the marketplace.
Dr. Straub, let me ask you, I know you work so much with solo practitioners. They've already got so much on their plate with hiring, making sure that they are running a business, all these different things. How do we lay on this next level of kind of worry about pricing and tariffs and everything else, especially knowing the end of the year is coming and trying to make sure that we're hitting those fourth quarter goals as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's one more layer on a ever existing challenge for all of dentistry and private care is profit margin. And so if we look historically speaking, and there's a lot of data that just came out from the ADA in terms of workforce, that doctors are working more and making less when inflation adjusted over the last 15 years. Why is that happening? Revenues are down, costs are up, and part of that is supplies and equipment. Labor costs are up, and that shrinks the profit margin. But there's a lot of insurance reimbursements way down, and so there's lots of things that are decreasing this profit margin. So when your profit margin is shrinking, and unfortunately, dentistry, we haven't done a great job of being good business people. So most dentists don't know what their profit margin is, whereas an MBA running a manufacturing company probably knows exactly what the profit margin is. But what dentists, it's very emotional, right? It's lonely. Leadership is lonely. You're in a small group practice or a solo or even a big practice, and it's lonely because you're trying to do really good clinical care all day, and you don't have a team of people researching all this stuff. Now, that's a challenge, but I think that's what makes dentistry the greatest profession, is that I can be an entrepreneur and a clinician. And I want to protect that because I think that's the standard of care for dental quality is, private care. However, what happens in any business when your profit margins shrink? You have to think outside of the box. And every dentist has got to be asking him or herself, how do I maintain my quality of care? Because we never want to diminish quality, because we have this business focus and moral and ethical focus, and we've got to merge those two together. How do I, as a dentist, maintain my quality of care while lowering costs? And so we know there's some things that are higher and they're probably never going down, but how do I increase or mitigate my profit margin? And, there's buying groups. We have a GPO, a group purchasing organization, that helps with bargaining power. There's ways to practice more efficiently, whether it's cross-training, auxiliaries, better scheduling, technology, innovation of the future, AI, other tech, data. So dentists are going to have to, and the ones that are going to succeed are going to occasionally get themselves take off their clinician's hat and think more like an entrepreneur. How do I run this business in a way that maintains a profit margin? Now, it's not all about a doctor making a bunch of money, but when doctors have a healthy profit margin, what happens? They provide better care. They spend more time with their patients. They're more generous to their teams. Their teams then are better able to support their families. So it's important for a private practicing dentist to have a healthy profit margin, because that impacts lots of lives, not just the dentist. So it's really the doctor thinking more like an entrepreneur occasionally, not just a dentist that's doing MOD residence.
Joe, from your perspective, are tariffs the new normal? Is this something that, as you look at long range 4GC, is this something that your company just has to plan for and adapt to moving forward?
It's an interesting question, and I think the answer changes, kind of week by week, right? I mean, there's some discussions going on right now between, the Japanese and the U.S. government have always had very strong relationships, right? And so there's some carve out discussions happening there that potentially could mitigate, some of the costs that we're having to bear. Now we'll see what happens, right? But I do think, if you look at the body of work that was done, I mean, I literally have spent $5 million in tariffs since April, since this thing started. You can't plan for that, right? And so you got to say, okay, what is the future? What is the new norm? And then how could it change based on global diplomacy, negotiations, and how those go? I think you have to bake in increase. Could we see over the course of time that just stabilize, or variance by country or different category? Potentially. I think the one thing that we've all learned is we have to be very agile, number one. Number two, all of us are in the same boat. And I think number three is we say, hey, listen, we can't control this. All we can do is put the best things in place to react to it, and then communicate with transparency to our customers around what's going on, what are our plans, how can we continue to support high quality care for the dentist?
Dave, I'm going to ask you the same question. From a dental industry perspective, is this the new normal, and how do we adapt to it if so?
That's an excellent question. Obviously, I'm not qualified to answer that on a political basis, but I think we do have to be more nimble. And I do think we need to be ready for this type of thing. There's going to be continual political pressures to do certain things. I think to some degree, we do have to be ready for it. We have to be better at understanding when these happen, and maybe we need to, make our agreements differently as a distributor than what we've done in the past. And we have to be able to kind of turn on a dime. I mean, to use Joe's example, if you have a $5 million increase in cost, as a distributor, that means I got to sell $100 million more. That's not going to happen, right? So,
Right.
So this is where, when I say nimble, I don't just mean from a operating standpoint, but obviously from a financial planning standpoint too, because every time that happens or they change, the baseline changes. And as a public company, the last company I worked for was public. That's a big deal, right? So at the end of the day, we try our best to forecast sales and forecast profits, but it's very difficult. And I just think we have to get better at it.
So, gentlemen, I'm going to go around the horn here. Last question for each of you, if you don't mind. A year from now, I'm going to put on that crystal ball hat or whatever it might be. A year from now, will we still be talking about tariffs, and how will they have changed the dental industry? I'm curious. Dr. Straub, I'm going to let you go first, if you don't mind.
I think we'll be talking less about tariffs, but we definitely will be talking about the pressure on profit for every level of the industry. And I think what will come to be is that there will be some, I love the term, what got us here won't get us there. And so all of us are going to have to think about the next phase in the future and stop relying on what has been. And so I'll speak from a dental practitioner standpoint or a practice owner, that some of the strategies and some of the habits and behaviors of 10 years ago no longer will have an outcome of success in the future. And so we're going to have to think smarter because the world is changing.
Joe, how about you? What are you looking at a year from now? I know it's a crystal ball thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is I concur completely. I think there's going to be downstream effects relative to increasing prices, right? That I don't think we know what some of those data points will be, to be quite frank. There's different hypotheses and theories, but we just don't know. I do also think that in that we've gone through it and we've dealt with it, we've learned through the pain, right? We said, okay, we're going to plan a little differently. We're going to work with our key stakeholders in a certain way where we can have tighter information faster. We're going to continue to take a look at, for us, we do a lot of Kaizen innovation with our Japanese heritage around cost reduction improvements just based on efficiencies. So again, I run a pretty big manufacturing business. I've got, you can't see it, but about 300 people behind that wall making products like glass ionomers and polymers, et cetera, et cetera. I want to help that team to get the best technology. I'm going to have to pause that, right? So I know that what I committed to them a year ago, I'm not going to be able to provide that for maybe another 6 to 18 months because I can't afford to do it right now, right? So that's okay. What we got to do is we got to be smart about how do we apply those things we do know to make sure that we're in a position to continue to improve. And when things change, to be able to react the right way.
Dave, I'm going to give you last shot, my friend.
Wow, how about that? Well, I'm going to agree with my colleagues, but just to kind of, frame it up a little bit, I do think that tariffs will not be as big a deal. The word tariff will not be used as much a year from now, but I do think that the profitability concerns that all three elements we've all touched on it, right, are going to be there. And it's going to force the industry to become more and more efficient, more and more productive, and more focused on return on investment. Because of that, because he's got labor costs, Barrett has labor costs, distributors have labor costs, that you've got to figure out how to use those labor costs, which are most of our largest expense. You have to figure out how to use that in a way that is more productive, and that is putting pressure. I mean, you're seeing a lot of things happening within the industry right now that reflect cost pressures and profitability strain, both from the dentist and from the industry. And as I said to Barrett, the profession and the industry mirror one another in many respects. And so we have to be always, watching together and really working through this stuff together.
Well, I know there's going to be plenty of talk about tariffs still to come the rest of this year. I know that that's going to be a big focus at the Dental Trade Alliance annual meeting that's coming up in November in Texas. We will be at that. Dr. Bicuspid will be, as well as I know some of these gentlemen will be there as well. We'll be talking about the impact of the industry on future podcasts from the DTA meeting as well. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time and your expertise and your insights today. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Kevin. Great seeing you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye now.
You too. See you in Texas.
Thank you all.
All right.
And thank you all for listening to this episode of the drbicuspid.com podcast. We so appreciate your time. And obviously, anything that we can do to help you better navigate through the world of tariffs, we'll try to do through our podcast publications as well. Till next time, it's Kevin Henry, editor, chief, signing off. And as always, wishing you nothing but success.